this video, we will be talking about characters in The Sopranos that resemble real-life mobsters and certain actions that occur. Not saying the characters are strictly based off of the real mobsters in the video, but certain parallels between the characters and real-life mobsters. Let's get straight into it. First, let's talk about the Gambino crime family. When Phil Leotardo told Butchie and Albie that the Sopranos make everybody and anybody over there, and the way they had to do it is all messed up. Guys don't get their fingers pricked, there's no sword and gun on a table. That's a parallel to John Gotti to the Jersey family, the Cavalcante family. John Gotti ordered the Cavalcante family to repeat their inductions of made members because they failed to follow the rules during the original ceremonies and considered them invalid. Butchie was similar to Sammy the Bull. He was a very hot-headed character who wasn't scared to step to anybody. There was even the scene in the hospital where Tony visits Phil. Butchie is sitting in the doorway trying to bully Tony. Another scene that shows his Sammy the Bull similarity is when they put a hit out on Doc Santoro. Butchie waited for Doc to leave the restaurant, where a gunman came out of nowhere and killed Doc. Then you see Butchie making sure it's done before he drives away. Similar to when Paul Castellano was gunned down in front of Sparks Steakhouse, while Sammy the Bull drove by with John Gotti to make sure Castellano was dead. The scene where Tony tells the family he will not deliver Tony B up to Johnny Sack is similar to an incident that happened with Sammy the Bull. Sammy the Bull talked about a very similar situation about wanting revenge for his friend Stymie. He asked the acting boss of the Colombo family to hand over a guy to him. Instead, the Colombos killed him themselves, which is what Tony Soprano did to his cousin Tony B. Carmine Sr. resembled Paul Castellano. Castellano identified more as a businessman than a criminal, taking over non-legitimate businesses and converting them into legitimate enterprises. Carmine Sr. did this in The Sopranos with the HUD scam with Tony, turning houses into legitimate income stream along with the Esplanade. Although Carmine Sr. was respected amongst everyone in the Mafia underworld in the show, the same cannot be said about Castellano, who wasn't liked as much and was hanging out with more businessmen than his actual Mafia members. Johnny Sack came to Tony Soprano and asked him to clip Rusty Milio. John Gotti also requested the Cavalcante family to kill Fred Weiss. The murder of Fred Weiss wasn't so different from when Rusty was killed. Rusty was gunned down in his car while Fred Weiss was by his car when he was killed. Johnny Sack and John Gotti were both incarcerated in prison, but later transferred to the United States Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. They both died from cancer. Christopher is parallel to Anthony Bruno Indelicato, who was part of the Bonanno family. Bruno Indelicato also had a father who was in the Mafia, Sonny Red, who was killed much like Dickie Moltisanti. Bruno was heavy into coke and at one point allegedly took a shot at John Gotti while high, much like Christopher drawing down on Tony at the Bing and shooting at Tony's car. The incident with Bruno Indelicato reportedly occurred while driving on the Van Wyck Expressway, where Indelicato was shooting at Gotti's car while Angelo Ruggiero was driving him. Vito Spatafore is another character with a very direct parallel. The real-life mobster John D'Amato was also a North Jersey mafioso. John D'Amato was an acting boss of the Cavalcante family. D'Amato was suspected of engaging in homosexual activity in Brooklyn in January 1992. He was discovered by another connected guy at a gay nightclub and killed, much like Vito. Sal Bonpensiero had some similarities to Gregory Scarpa. A feared hitman, was also a government informant known for playing both sides against the middle, much like Bonpensiero attempts to do. Tony even refers to Bonpensiero at one point as a stone gangster when talking to Vin Makazian after being told Sal is an informant. Junior Soprano, faking Alzheimer's and eventually falling to the illness, is based closely on former Genovese family boss Vincent the Chin Gigante. Gigante, known as the Oddfather, would dress in a tattered blue bathrobe much like Junior does on several occasions. He would be seen walking around Greenwich Village, talking to himself, acting peculiar. He did this charade to hide the fact that he was the boss of the Genovese family and to plead insanity when charged. This worked several times and was only undone due to overwhelming evidence. It's also widely speculated that he eventually did become mentally ill, just like Junior. Phil Leotardo and Butchie had a similar parallel to Vic Amuso and Gaspipe Casso of the Lucchese family, who at one point tried to put a hit out on the entire New Jersey faction. Butchie and Phil wanted to take them out because of what they saw as redundant upper management bleeding off half the kick. Paulie Walnuts, played by Tony Sirico, was essentially playing himself. He was associated with the Colombo crime family. In one episode he says, "I lived through the 70s by the skin of my nuts when the Colombos were going at it," referring to the war with Crazy Joe Gallo. Agent Harris is informed by his coworker that Phil was killed. Due to Harris leaking Phil's payphone locations, he says, "Damn, we're going to win this thing." Special Agent Lindley DeVecchio was leaking information of the Scarpa faction during the Colombo family war, reportedly saying the same thing in his office when informed that a rival faction member had been killed. Let me know what you think down below.